Yeah, intermission.
Hello everyone. In this video here we are going to go ahead and work with this majestic animal that I have named Grand Dog. As you can see up here, not only because it looks grand, but it's got a little bit of white in those whiskers. It might be a grandpa dog. I don't know, but it's a great picture. Got this one off of Unsplash by Ken Reed. So thank you very much. We're going to be using that for this demonstration. And what we're going to cover today is how you can do a few effects in Photoshop to get your work into InDesign and hopefully get the look that you're going for. So we'll go over a few of these steps, how to prep the document, and how you can assign some colors in InDesign. So the first thing you can see here is that we saved this as a Photoshop file. So I have this file ready to go. And I'm going to do a couple different things here. The first is I want to grayscale this image. So if I go up to Image, Mode, and Grayscale, and say Discard, you will see that I have a grayscaled image at this point, and I might want to play a little bit with the value. So I can come to Image Adjustments and Levels, and you'll see that this pops up here. And if you want to make your darks darker, you would start on the left, your lights lighter on the right, and then you have your midtones here. So by moving this to the right, you'll see that my blacks start to darken up. And I want some contrast here, so I'm going to bring it a little bit more here. And then my whites, I can bring that up slightly as well. Then my midtones, as you can see here, especially in the face of the dog, how some of those can darken up quickly, how you can bring some of that out. Now with these, you don't need to make huge changes, just little things are going to make quite a bit of difference. So start very small. It might also be helpful just to come in here and go drastic to say, oh man, that changes quite a bit. And finesse it just a little bit, and you'll find out that you don't need to go very far to get the contrast that you would like. So once we have that set, we'll say okay, and we'll save this image. Let's go ahead up to File, Save As, and we'll want to save it as a TIFF file. Now this is very important. If you're wanting InDesign to do the handling of the colors, make sure that this is set as a TIFF and say Save. On your TIFF options, you can say OK, and you're ready to go. Now, there's a couple things that I can do. One is you can come into Image Mode, and once an image is grayscaled, you'll notice the bitmap shows up. If I click on bitmap, I get this bitmap dialog box. Now there's a few different methods that you can choose from down here. Go ahead and play with those at some time, but we're going to work with 50% threshold and a halftone screen today. We'll leave it on 50% threshold. And what this means is anything darker than a 50% gray is going to go to black, and anything lighter than 50% gray will go to white. Whenever you bitmap an image, essentially what you're doing is turning it into a binary image at that point. It is made of black pixels or white space. It's black or white, on or off, and very simplified in that way, but it allows you to play with it in ways that you wouldn't be able to without bitmapping it. And we'll go over some of this once we put it in InDesign. So bitmapping at 50% threshold, you'll see that sometimes it works well on photography, other times it won't. This is something that lends itself a little bit more to logos. Work that you've done, maybe vector work that has very high contrast, sharp edges, but we're going to go ahead and do it with this photograph so that you can see what happens. Each one of these methods is going to add a different feel to the photo. So depending on what you like and what you're going for, it might add to whatever it is that you're building the work for. So let's go ahead with this. If I say OK here, you will see now that I have either black or white and nothing in between. Grayscale is gone. If we zoom in really close here, you will see it is just black pixels or white and nothing else. So let's go ahead and save this one. We'll go up to File, Save As, and again, make sure it says a TIFF if you would like to do the color handling in InDesign. We'll go ahead and call this one Dog 2, hit Save, and say OK. Now the last part here, let's go back to before we bitmapped it. So if we go back here, we've got our black and white image. By doing a Command Z, you can also go up to Edit and Undo. But we're back to our black and white. The next thing that we can do is we can turn it to a halftone screen, which does very much the same thing that the 50% threshold does, but this holds up the color a lot better in transition between the grayscale. What we'll be doing is we'll see that it will work very much like pointillism, screen prints that you may have seen in the past, work on this idea of using many little dots to create the image. So we can go to Image, Mode, and Bitmap. We'll change this to halftone screen, say OK, and you'll notice when you hit OK that you get this new dialog box that pops up with a halftone screen. This asks your frequency in lines per inch, the angle that you want the dots to appear in, and what shape you're going to use. And we're going to use round for this. Our angle will be 45. Now your angle is something you don't really need to worry about unless you're getting into multiple colors. Once you get into multiple colors, you need to know about those and set those accordingly so that you don't get any moire patterns happening unexpectedly. For our frequency, the lower the frequency, the larger the dots are going to appear. So for an example, we'll put 5 in here for frequency and say OK. And you will notice here that the dots are very large. Depending on the look that you're going for, this may work for you, but if you're wanting to keep detail, you're going to need to make those dots smaller. So let's come up here to go to Image, Mode, Bitmap. Again, I just did a Command Z to get back to the grayscaled image, then went back and bitmapped it again. And I could change this frequency to something like 15, say OK. And now you can see that I still have the dots happening, I still have this effect. When I'm zoomed out though, I have the detail. I can see where the shades and variations are happening. You'll also notice that there's some dots that are happening in the background here. Now if your background was pure white, you wouldn't have this. But because it was a light gray that was happening in the background, it translates over into these dots that as you zoom all the way out, starts to look about that gray color. So that's something to be aware of. If you don't want these dots in the background, you're going to want to make sure that this background is pure white and not some low-level gray. So let's go ahead and come up to File and Save As and save this image. This will be Dog 3. And again, save it as a TIFF. And say OK. All right, now we're ready to move over into InDesign.